Hunter x Hunter's officially back, and so far we've been focusing a lot on the Mafia shenanigans happening on the lower decks. And don't get me wrong, I love the attention that Troop is getting, and as someone who likes crime films, this Mafia war is some of my favorite stuff in manga period. But I also love the succession war happening in the upper decks, and I know a lot of people who are desperate to see one of our main characters again, Kurapika. Now Kurapika has a lot stacked on his plate this arc. It seems like between the Mafia and the Troop, this is going to be York New City Part 2, with a lot of Kurapika focus in it. In addition to Chrollo and the Troop, Sarainet seems to be another antagonist set up to fight Kurapika. But before all that, Kurapika still has to deal with an elusive assassin who's been stalking his Nen classes, Silent Majority. Now if you don't remember who this is and what's going on in Kurapika's classes, I suggest you read this arc from the start or watch one of the many recap videos out there. In this video I'm going to revive this 4-year-old discussion and evaluate all the theories and culprits in order to determine who the Silent Majority is once and for all. I've seen a lot of theories and discussions about this topic, but I believe this is the most in-depth analysis, and I'll be laying all the evidence we have on the table. Before we start pointing fingers though, let's go over the entire situation. After learning about the Succession War, and more specifically its use of Nen beasts, Kurapika decides to host a Nen class for all willing bodyguards of any prince, in order to force a stalemate. At 9 AM on the second day of the voyage, the class starts. Shortly after, as everyone has assembled and Kurapika begins instruction, a woman-like marionette figure is conjured near the back of the room. After introductions, one of the servants, Loberry, notices the figure in the back of the room and draws everyone's attention to it. But she's the only one who can see it. As soon as everyone looks away, Barrigen is attacked and sucked dry by snakes conjured by Silent Majority, before being shot and killed by Sakata along with the Nen snakes. Barrigen's corpse is then carried away by the royal army, and Loberry is arrested as an accomplice. I'm going to be using 2 criteria in order to determine who the user of Silent Majority is. Methods and motivations. The first criteria we're going to look at is methods, and as far as we know, the murders are committed exclusively through Nen. And since Nen is so conditional, we can narrow down the suspects based on the rules of the ability. As far as we know, Silent Majority works through 3 steps. Step 1. Through unknown means, the user attaches their ability to a target. Step 2. To cause a distraction, the user conjures a woman-like Nen construct that only the target can see. Step 3. Once everyone is distracted, 4 conjured snakes can drain the victim's blood. It takes 44 seconds for each snake individually, but only 11 seconds if all the snakes work together. It doesn't seem like the doll woman is entirely necessary for the snakes to be activated. It's probably only used as a distraction in crowded spaces so the snakes can continue draining the blood uninterrupted. Because if the snakes fail to kill a single person, the ability will rebound back onto the user. Another thing that's important is that the effective range of the ability seems to be only a few yards. The Silent Majority was going to use Myuhan's argument with Kurapika as a diversion, but apparently Myuhan wasn't one of the 10 people who are in range of his ability. I'm not sure if the user meant in range to be killed by the snakes, or to serve as the target for the marionette and be the diversion. I'm assuming it's the latter, because the user wouldn't want the one being attacked to be the center of attention. We can assume based on the range of the ability and how the mystery is framed, the user is someone who was inside room 1014 when the murder took place. And based on the information gathered from the methods, here's who we can eliminate for sure. Kurapika. Obviously we can eliminate Kurapika. At this point in the story, we know his Nen category and all 5 of his Nen abilities. Although the students of the class do have a good reason to suspect him, from their perspective, it looks like Kurapika lured them there with false promises of Nen training in order to pick them off one by one. But we know this isn't true since we've seen Kurapika's thoughts and we know he's hunting the Silent Majority user as well. Queen Oito and Prince Woble. We can also safely eliminate Queen Oito and Prince Woble. We know Silent Majority can't be Woble's Nen beast, since it functions differently. Silent Majority snakes are visible to everyone since they're conjured, but Guardian Spirit Beasts are invisible to the prince it belongs to and all non-Nen users. The doll woman, on the other hand, is invisible to everyone who isn't the target of the ability. Also, we know through the user's monologue that it's too complex to be a baby, and way too sinister to be the sensitive Queen Oito. Oito also seems to be a complete newbie at Nen, and she's learning along with the other bodyguards. Bill and Shimano. Bill and Shimano had been cleared with Kurapika's dowsing chain, which we know is impossible to lie through. We also know Bill is an enhancer, and his ability isn't suited for combat. And Shimano had just recently learned about the existence of Nen. Just based on how helpful these two are, they just wouldn't have any motivation to be the Silent Majority user anyways. Barrigen and Myuhan. These guys are dead. Unless Silent Majority is some weird, sacrificial, post-mortem Nen ability, there's almost zero chance that these guys can beat the Silent Majority user. Furykov and Babimyna. We can eliminate Furykov due to the fact that he already knows who the user is himself. When Kurapika asks who can already use Nen, only Furykov and Bellirante raise their hands. Babimyna is Furykov's partner, and his specialty is counterattack, whereas Furykov's specialty is analyzing Nen users. Furykov identifies 4 other Nen users who were secretly hiding their Nen prowess, one of them being the silent majority user. Loberry. Loberry was the target of the silent majority doll woman, which pretty much clears her from being the suspect. The silent majority referred to her by name, and unless the silent majority user talks in the third person, targeted himself, and then got herself arrested, Loberry is obviously not the user. Furykov even acknowledges her as one of the secret Nen users besides the silent majority user. Now that I think about it, it's pretty sus that she knows Nen and she didn't raise her hand, but it's probably more likely that she got attacked by one of the Nen beasts and her Nen got awakened and she didn't even realize it. Yuhirai and Shedule. Yuhirai and Shedule are the other 2 of the 4 secret Nen users that Furykov identified. These 2 didn't initially raise their hands, but that's because they didn't know that their Nen abilities were awakened through 9th Prince Hulkenberg's Nen Beast, which they willingly confessed to when they found out. The fact that Furykov identified them as the last 2 Nen users, besides the silent majority user, is enough proof that they're not the silent majority user. Ladiolus and Illardia. These ladies are very unlikely to be the user. I mean, they didn't even know why they were there in the first place. Also, Kurapika used Ladiolus as an example of a newbie learning Nen, and Furykov confirmed that her growth was normal, so that pretty much confirms that they can't be the silent majority user. But the Nen class murder wasn't the first or last time the silent majority had struck. Even before the Nen beasts were active, nearly all of Woble's bodyguards were wiped out by what we now can assume was silent majority due to the holes in the victims' bodies. And on the second day of Nen classes, Myuhan, one of Saraine's personal guards, was also killed by silent majority. With this information, we can narrow down the suspects even further using motivations. Danjin. Danjin was Myuhan's partner, and he reported his death back to 4th Prince Saraine. We know that Theta and Slakka are the only 2 Nen users in Saraine's party, so it's very unlikely for him to be the user. Tenftory, Hashito, and Sakata. Hashito and Sakata actually did not come to attend the Nen classes. They were assigned by 3rd Prince Zhenglei to serve as guard replacements, in exchange for information about Nen. Tenftory was sent to the Nen classes, additionally, to watch over Kurapika. From what we know, it seems like Zhenglei genuinely just wants to learn Nen, and wants to help Kurapika in order to hold his end of the deal. Zhenglei's personality seems honorable, so I doubt he would even want his guards to interfere, even if they did have Nen abilities. Plus, Sakata was the one who tried to kill the Nen snakes, which would be kind of productive if he really was a silent majority user. Maor and Longhi. Maor seemed skeptical at first, but he was sent by 5th Prince Tabepa. Tabepa actively wants to ally herself with Kurapika, so I doubt she would send her guard to stir things up. Furykov also determined that Maor's Nen had been awakened by Kurapika, and there was nothing nefarious going on, so he's not the one Furykov expects to be the user. And since Maor is the captain of his guards, Longhi seems to be following his lead, making them unlikely to be the silent majority users. Bellirante. Now, a lot of people think that Bellirante is for sure the silent majority user, but there also was a lot of people who thought he was secretly Hisoka too. He just seems to be on everyone's radar because of his aloof personality. I mean, after Myuhan dies, he teases him for taking a piss in enemy territory. He seems to be on good terms with Kurapika, and he doesn't want the classes to end despite already knowing Nen. But there are 2 big reasons why I can't put him very high on my suspect list. For one, he's a hunter, and the hunters don't really have a horse in this race, so they're mainly trying to force a stalemate. You could say that killing everyone is his way to try to force a stalemate, and his room is close enough for him to commit the first few murders without actually being there. But then why would he kill Barrigen, one of Cervantes' men assigned to marry him? What's the point of targeting the younger princes when they have a big disadvantage against the older princes? He also goes out of his way to work with Bill and Kurapika to deliver information back to Miriam's room when he gets locked out, so I don't see why he would do any of this. Not to mention, Furykov already knew he was a Nen user, and excluded him from who he believes is the real silent majority user. But while there's strong evidence toward Bellirante, there's stronger evidence away from Bellirante being the silent majority user. Slakka. Slakka is someone that I'm honestly not sure about. He's mainly focused on gathering information for the second queen. Both first queen Unma and second queen Duazo are allied in order to gather information from the younger princes, which is why he's willing to work closely with Babimyna. But the fact that the first round of silent majority killings killed all the bodyguards of every queen besides the first 2, that makes it seem like the kills associated with either Duazo or Unma. And since the silent majority user seems to be very hostile towards Benjamin's men, I'm gonna go with Duazo. But there's another one of Duazo's guards that is an even bigger suspect to me. And by the way the story is framed, it makes it seem as if the user is one of the people who came to the Nen classes for the Nen training specifically. So I'll leave Slakka in the middle ground here. Now that we've narrowed the suspects down, it's come to the point that these last 3 suspects have equally sufficient means to enact the crime. So we'll have to evaluate potential motives in order to come to a conclusion. Mushaho. Mushaho is one of the most obvious suspects to me. For one, he came to the classes with a mission, which he found to be very important. Secondly, he's one of 5th Queen Swinkle's men, and so was Tough D, who is a Nen user who killed Momose. This can imply that Mushaho is also a Nen user that is willing to kill a younger prince. And lastly, it seems like the deaths stopped as soon as Mushaho stopped going to the classes. There are a couple problems though. One being Mushaho insisted that they carry guns during the classes, which would put him at a disadvantage if he really was a silent majority user. Also, because Sale is Swinkle's only prince, she likely pulled out of the contest as soon as he died, leaving no incentive for Mushaho to kill anyone. But what really throws a monkey wrench in this theory is the fact that Rihan states that he's the only one in Sale's room who can see the Nen beast, meaning he might be the only Nen user in there. Now, Furykov is the genius Nen analyst out of Benjamin's men, but since Rihan's entire ability revolves around him having to figure out how his opponent's ability works, I say he's easily number 2, and he's probably a very skilled Nen analyst in his own right. And besides, it's possible that Furykov reported all the information he's gathered to Benjamin directly. That information would be very useful if relayed to Rihan, so that he knows that there's another Nen user in the room who can potentially stop his attack on the prince. Also, Woody, who appears to be the first victim of silent majority, seems to be associated with 5th Queen Swinkle. So if Mushaho killed him, that would fly in the face of his entire motive. On top of that, I think on a meta level, it would be pretty lame if the silent majority user just packed up their bags and went home. I mean, if any author was going to write something so anticlimactic, it would probably be Togashi, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and assume that the user is still attending the classes. Satobi. Satobi is my personal pick for the most likely, according to the information we have from the story. For one, he's a captain of Duazo's guard, and like I explained earlier, Duazo seems like the only queen who could have sent her assassin to Woble's room. You could say that Duazo is too meek to order her guard to go on the offensive, which is true, but she's also too meek to refuse if Camilla ordered her to. And Camilla seems to be bossing her around a lot. Although, Camilla seems way too impulsive to target someone that she doesn't consider an immediate threat. So for now, she's focused on the higher princes. But it's also pretty suspicious that she's the only prince who didn't send any bodyguards to the Nen trainings. Satobi also seems like he's willing to lie low and monitor, and even negotiate with the other guard. So it doesn't seem like he has that much of a killing intent. But he's definitely not a fan of Kurapika. He and Maor were the biggest skeptics of Kurapika, and unlike Maor and the others I listed so far, Satobi doesn't really have any big reason why he isn't the silent majority user. Satobi's stationed in 7th Prince Lazarus' room, and one of Benjamin's personal guards, Kanjiro, doesn't believe that there's any other Nen users inside of the room. But what's interesting though, is he himself admits that he's not as good of an analyst as Furykov is, and it's possible that he's being fooled. Furykov himself believes that the silent majority user is good at hiding Nen. So the fact that Togashi wrote Kanjiro to be explicitly uncertain of his Nen analyst abilities might be a little bit of a clue. But this is all assuming that Furykov's intel didn't get to Kanjiro yet, like I said with Rihan, but his uncertainty suggests that he doesn't have any intel. So if I had to put my money on the line, I would say that Satobi is the user of the silent majority. Yuri. Lastly, we have the dark horse candidate, which is Yuri. Yuri might be the most interesting suspect out of all of them. And although she's not my pick for the most likely, the implication of her being the user has the most potential out of all of them. First of all, Yuri seemed really happy that she got sent to the classes. She says that she's happy to get away from the 10th Prince Kacho. There are two distinct thought bubbles from where she and Loberry says that they lucked out, and where she and Loberry says that they're happy to get away from Prince Kacho. I think it might be a bit of a reach, but some people think that the top thought bubble represents the silent majority user's thoughts, since it looks similar to the thought bubble that the user thinks in. A more solid piece of evidence that Yuri is a silent majority user is that she knew the name of Loberry even before the introductions. Now it's possible that Loberry talked beforehand before the classes starts to the other servants and the real user overheard, but Loberry's name is a piece of information that only Yuri should have. Loberry was also a Nen user beforehand, which is strange for a non-combatant, but it also could mean that Yuri is one too. One thing that Yuri has for her that no other suspect does is that her appearance really does fit the motif of the ability. Silent Majority appears as a doll woman, and Yuri is the only female suspect that makes it this high up on the list. Also, Silent Majority seems to be based on two external media. Its main name, Silent Majority, seems to be based on the Japanese pop group called Kayakazaya 46, whose first single is also named Silent Majority. Now get this. One of the central singers in this group is called Yurina Hirate. Yurina. Also, look at her haircut. It's the exact same as the Silent Majority's doll woman. The secondary name of the ability comes from the sci-fi shoujo manga they were 11. In this manga, there's a group of 10 space cadets taking an exam on a spaceship, but when they arrived on the ship, they found out there were 11 of them. The relevant part being that there's one person that was not intended to be there. But on the other hand, if Yuri was really the silent majority user, not only would that mean that she kills one of Seiko's people in the initial attacks, but by using Loberry as the target and diversion, she got her partner Loberry arrested, and 6th Queen Seiko investigated for conspiracy. So that makes it very unlikely that Yuri's working for her queen. But what if the silent majority isn't there to support any queen or any prince, but for their own motives? So far, we haven't actually heard silent majority say anything indicating that they're participating in the succession war. And if we take the name of the ability at face value, it can indicate a different motive. The term silent majority means a large group of people in a group or a country who aren't outspoken about their beliefs. And especially recently, this class has been hinting at a giant Kakin class uprising happening on the Black Whale. Maor and the Heil-ly family are the ones provoking it. So is it possible that the silent majority was a secret member of the Heil-ly family and gained their ability through Morena's contagion ability? Or is it possible that the silent majority is another completely separate party? It wouldn't be unlike Togashi to introduce an entirely different faction in this arc. The only thing that doesn't make sense in these theories is the timing. The only people who could have been there for all the killings would be Oito, Woble, Kurapika, Bill, and Shimano. And they've already been cleared. So honestly, there's no really great suspects so far. It's possible things will get clearer once we learn more information, or maybe the silent majority user will be an entirely new character. The only thing that we know for sure is that with Togashi's writing style, we can't really be sure of anything. That's really all I have for this video. There are so many topics that I can talk about deeply within the Succession War. It's such a huge arc and has so much potential. So if you want to see other Hunter x Hunter videos about really Hunter x Hunter in general, or deep dive character analysis videos, then you might want to subscribe to this channel. And if you have your own personal theories or ideas of who the silent majority user is, or you have any ideas for videos going forward, you could drop all of them in the comment section. I usually get to all the comments because the channel is so small right now. But if you want to change that, hitting the like button can help the channel get noticed by the algorithm. That's all I have right now. See you in the next video.